29. Anna reseated herself in the calash in a state of mind even worse than when she left home. To her former torments was now added a feeling of being affronted and repudiated, of which she had been clearly sensible during the meeting with Kitty. "Where to, ma'am? Home?" asked Peter. "Yes, home," she said, now not even thinking of where she was going. How they looked at me, as at something dreadful, incomprehensible, and strange. What can he be telling that other man so warmly, she thought, glancing at two pedestrians. How is it possible to tell another what one feels? I meant to tell Dolly, but it's a good thing I didn't. How glad she would have been at my misfortune. She would have concealed it, but her chief feeling would have been joy that I'm punished for the pleasures she has envied me. Kitty would have been still more pleased. How well I can read her. She knows I was more than usually amiable to her husband. She is jealous of me and hates me, and she also despises me. In her eyes, I am an immoral woman. If I were immoral, I could make her husband fall in love with me. If I wanted to. And I did want to. There is someone satisfied with himself, she thought, seeing a fat, ruddy man who was driving past in the opposite direction, and who, taking her for an acquaintance, lifted his shiny head above his bald and shiny head, but then discovered that he was mistaken. He thought he knew me, but he knows me as little as does anyone else in the world. I don't even know myself. I know my appetites, as the French say. Those boys want some of that dirty ice cream. They know that for a certainty, she thought, as she saw two boys stopping an ice cream vendor, who lifted down a tub from his head and wiped his perspiring face with the end of the cloth. We all want something sweet and tasty. If we can get no bonbons, then dirty ice creams. And Kitty is just the same. If not Vronsky, then Levin. And she envies and hates me. And we all hate one another. Kitty me, and I Kitty. Now that is true. Tyutkin, hairdresser. I have my hair dressed by Tyutkin. An absurd name. I shall tell him that when he comes back, she thought, and smiled. But just then she recollected that now she had no one to tell anything funny to. Besides, there is nothing amusing or merry. Everything is nasty. They are ringing for vespers, and how carefully that tradesman is crossing himself, as if he were afraid of dropping something. What are those churches, that ringing, and these lies for? Only to conceal the fact that we all hate each other, like those cabmen who are so angrily swearing at one another. Yashvin says, he wants to leave me without a shirt, and I him. Now that's true. With these thoughts, which occupied her so that she even forgot to think of her troubles, she arrived at the porch of their house. Only when she saw the hall porter coming out to meet her did she remember that she had sent the note and the telegram. "Is there an answer?" she asked. "I will look," he replied, and glancing at his desk, he took up and handed her the thin square envelope of a telegram. "I cannot return before 10. Vronsky," she read. "And the man has not yet returned?" "No, ma'am," answered the hall porter. "Well, in that case I know what I must do," said she to herself, and conscious of a vague sense of wrath and a desire for vengeance rising within her, she ran upstairs. I shall go to him myself. Before quitting him forever, I will tell him everything. I never hated anyone as I hate that man, thought she. Seeing his hat on the hat rail, she shuddered with aversion. She did not realize that his telegram was in answer to hers, and that he had not yet received her note. She imagined him now calmly conversing with his mother and the Princess Sorokina, and rejoicing at her sufferings. Yes, I must go at once, she thought, not yet sure where to go to. She thought, not yet sure where to go to. She wished to get away as soon as possible from the feelings she experienced in that terrible house. The servants, the walls, the things in the house, all repelled and angered her, and oppressed her like a weight. Yes, I must go to the railway station, and if I don't find him, I must go there and expose him. She looked at the timetable published in the daily paper. The train left at 8:20 p.m. I shall have time. She gave the order to harness another pair of horses and busied herself packing her handbag with things necessary for a few days. She knew she would not return. She vaguely resolved on one of the plans that passed through her mind. After what would occur at the railway station or at the Countess's estate, she would go on by the Nizhny Railway to the first town and remain there. Dinner was served. She went to the table, smelled the bread and cheese, and as the smell of everything eatable revolted her, she sent for the carriage and went out. The house already threw a shadow right across the street. The evening was bright and the sun still warm. Anushka, who came out with Anna's things, and Peter, who put them into the carriage, and the coachman, who was evidently dissatisfied, were all objectionable to her, and irritated her by their words and movements. "I shan't need you, Peter." "But how about your ticket?" "Well, as you like, I don't care," she replied with annoyance. Peter jumped up on the box, and with his arms akimbo, told the coachman to drive to the station. 30. There, again it is that girl. Again I understand it all, Anna said to herself as soon as the carriage started, and, rocking slightly, rattled over the stones. And again different impressions succeeded one another in her brain. What was the last thing I thought of that was so good? She tried to remember it. Tutkin, coiffeur. No, not that. Ah, yes, what Yashvin said. The struggle for existence and hatred are the only things that unite people. No, you're going in vain, she mentally addressed a company of people in a calash with 4 horses, who were evidently going out of town on a spree. And the dog you have with you won't help you. You can't escape from yourselves. Glancing in the direction in which Peter was looking, she saw a workman, nearly dead drunk, with his hat swaying about, who was being led off somewhere by a policeman. That one is more likely to, she thought. Count Vronsky and I have also been unable to find that pleasure from which we expected so much. And now for the first time, Anna turned the bright light in which she saw everything upon her relations with him, about which she had always avoided thinking. What did he look for in me? Not so much love as the satisfaction of his vanity. She remembered his words, the expression of his face, suggestive of a faithful setter's, in the early days of their union. Everything now confirmed her view. Yes, there was in him the triumph of successful vanity. Of course there was love too, but the greater part was pride in his success. He boasted of me. Now that is past. There's nothing to be proud of. Not to be proud, but to be ashamed. He has taken from me all he could, and now he does not need me. He is weary of me, and is trying not to act dishonourably toward me. Yesterday he betrayed himself. He wants a divorce and a marriage in order to burn his boat. He loves me, but how? The zest is gone, she said to herself in English. That man wants to astonish everybody, and is very well satisfied with himself, she thought, glancing at a rosy-faced shop assistant who was riding a tired horse. No, I've no longer the right flavour for him. If I go away, he will, at the bottom of his heart, be pleased. That was not a surmise. She saw it clearly in the piercing light which now revealed to her the meaning of life and of human relations. My love grows more and more passionate and egotistic, and his dwindles and dwindles, and that is why we are separating, she went on thinking. And there is no remedy. For me, everything centres in him, and I demand that he should give himself up to me more and more completely. But he wants more and more to get away from me. Before we were united, we really drew together, but now we are irresistibly drifting apart, and it cannot be altered. He tells me I am unreasonably jealous, and I have told myself that I am unreasonably jealous. But it is not true. I am not jealous, but dissatisfied. But She opened her mouth and changed her place in the carriage from agitation produced by a sudden thought. If I could be anything but his mistress, passionately loving nothing but his caresses. But I cannot, and do not want to be anything else. And this desire awakens disgust in him, and that arouses anger in me, and it cannot be otherwise. Don't I know that he would not deceive me, that he has no designs on that Sorokina, that he is not in love with Kitty, and will not be unfaithful to me? I know all that, but that does not make it easier for me. If, without loving me, he is kind and tender to me from a sense of duty, but what I desire is lacking, that would be 1,000 times worse than anger. It would be hell. And that is just how it is. He has long ceased to love me, and where love ceases, there hate begins. I don't know these streets at all. Here is a hill and houses, and in the houses are people, and more people. There's no end to them, and they all hate one another. Well, supposing I picture to myself what I want in order to be happy. Well, I get divorced, and Alexis Alexandrovich gives me Serezha, and I marry Vronsky. Remembering Karenina, she pictured him to herself with extraordinary vividness, as if he stood before her, with his mild, dull, lifeless eyes, the blue veins of his white hands, his intonations, his cracking fingers, and remembering the feeling that had once existed between them, and which had also been called love, she shuddered with revulsion. Well, I get divorced and become Vronsky's wife. What then? Will Kitty cease looking at me as she did this afternoon? No. Will Serezha stop asking and wondering about my two husbands? And between Vronsky and myself, what new feeling can I invent? Is any kind, not of happiness even, but of absence of torture, possible? No, no, she now answered herself without the least hesitation. It is impossible. Life is sundering us, and I am the cause of his unhappiness, and he of mine, and neither he nor I can be made different. Every effort has been made, but the screws have given way. A beggar woman with a baby. She thinks I pity her. Are we not all flung into the world only to hate each other, and therefore to torment ourselves and others? There go schoolboys. They are laughing. Serezha? She remembered. I thought I loved him too, and was touched at my own tenderness for him. Yet I lived without him, and exchanged his love for another's, and did not complain of the change, as long as the other love satisfied me. And she thought with disgust of what she called the other love. The clearness with which she now saw her own, and everyone else's life, pleased her. It's the same with me, and Peter, and Theodore the coachman, and with that tradesman, and with all the people that live away, there by the Volga, where those advertisements invite one to go, and everywhere and always, she thought, as she drove up to the low building of the Nizhny station, where the porters ran out to meet her. Shall I take a ticket to Obiralovka? Asked Peter. She had quite forgotten where and why she was going, and only understood the question by a great effort. Yes, she said, giving him her purse, and hanging her little red handbag on her arm, she descended from the carriage. As she moved among the crowd toward the first-class waiting-room, she gradually recalled all the details of her position, and the resolutions between which she vacillated. And again hope and despair, alternately chafing the old sores, lacerated the wounds of her tortured and violently fluttering heart. Sitting on the star-shaped couch, waiting for the train, she looked with repulsion at those who passed in and out. They were all objectionable to her. She thought now of how she would reach the station, and would write him a note, and of what she would write, and of how he was now, without understanding her sufferings, complaining of his position to his mother, and of how she would enter the room and what she would say to him. And then she thought how happy life might still be, and how tormenting she loved and hated him, and how dreadfully her heart was beating. 31. The bell rang. Some young man, ugly and bald-faced, passed by hurriedly, and yet attentive to the impression they created. Peter, in his livery and gaiters, with his dull animal face, also crossed the room, and came to her to see her into the train. Two noisy men became quiet as she passed them on the platform, and one of them whispered to the other something about her. Something nasty, of course. She mounted the high step of the railway carriage and seated herself in an empty compartment on the dirty, though once white, cover of the spring seat. Peter, with a stupid smile, raised his gold-braided hat to take leave of her. An insolent guard slammed the door and drew the latch. A misshapen lady with a bustle. Anna mentally stripped that woman and was horrified at her deformity. And a girl, laughing affectedly, ran past outside. "Catherine Andreevna has everything, ma tante," cried the little girl. Quite a child, and yet already affected and pulling faces, thought Anna. In order not to see anyone, she rose quickly and sat down at the opposite window of the empty compartment. A grimy, misshaped peasant in a cap, from under which his tousled hair stuck out, passed that window, stooping over the carriage wheels. There is something familiar about that misshaped peasant, she thought, and remembering her dream, she went to the opposite door, trembling with fright. The guard opened it to let in a husband and wife. "Do you wish to get out?" Anna did not answer. Neither the guard nor those entering noticed the horror on her face beneath the veil. She went back to her corner and sat down. The couple sat down opposite her, attentively but stealthily examining her dress. Both the husband and the wife seemed to Anna disgusting. The husband asked if she would allow him to smoke, evidently not because he wanted to, but to enter into conversation with her. Having received her permission, he began speaking to his wife in French, about things he wanted to speak about still less than he wanted to smoke. They talked nonsense insincerely, only in order that she should hear them. Anna saw distinctly how weary they were of one another, and how they hated each other. And it was impossible not to hate such ugly wretches. She heard the second bell ring, and then a moving of luggage, noise, shouting and laughter. It was so clear to Anna that no one had any cause for joy, that this laughter jarred on her painfully, and she wished to stop her ears, not to hear it. At last the third bell rang, the engine whistled and creaked, the coupling change gave a jerk, and the husband crossed himself. It would be interesting to ask him what he means by it, thought Anna, regarding him spitefully. She looked out of the window, past the lady, at the people on the platform who had been seeing the train off, and who appeared to be gliding backward. With rhythmic jerks over the joints of the rails, the carriage in which Anna sat rattled past the platform and a brick wall, past the signals and some other carriages. The sound of wheels slightly ringing against the rails became more rhythmical and smooth. The bright evening sunshine shone through the window, and a breeze moved the blind. Anna forgot her fellow travellers. Softly rocked by the motion of the carriage and inhaling the fresh air, she again began to think. Where did I leave off? At the point that I cannot imagine a situation in which life would not be a torment, that we all have been created in order to suffer, and that we all know this, and all try to invent means of deceiving ourselves. But when you see the truth, what are you to do? Reason has been given to man to enable him to escape from his troubles, said the lady in French, evidently pleased with her phrase, and mincing with her tongue. These words seemed to answer Anna's thought. To escape from his troubles, Anna mentally repeated, and glancing at the red-cheeked husband and his thin wife, she saw that the sickly wife considered herself misunderstood, and that the husband deceived her and encouraged her in her opinion of herself. Directing her searchlight upon them, Anna thought she saw their story and all the hidden recesses of their souls. But there was nothing of interest there, and she continued her reflections. Yes, it troubles me very much, and reason was given us to enable us to escape. Therefore I must escape. Why not put out the candle, if there is nothing more to look at? If everything is repulsive to look at? But how? Why did the guard run past holding the handrail? Why are those young men in the next carriage shouting? Why are they talking and laughing? It's all untrue, All lies, all deception, all evil. When the train stopped at the station, Anna got out with the crowd of passengers, and shunning them as if they were lepers, stopped on the platform, trying to remember why she had come there, and what she had intended to do. Everything that had appeared possible before was now so difficult to grasp, especially in this noisy crowd of odious people who would not leave her in peace. Porters rushed up, offering their services. Young men passed along the platform, clattering their heels on the planks, talking loudly and gazing at her. And people she met tried to get out of her way on the wrong side. Recollecting that she meant to go on if there was no reply, she stopped a porter and asked him whether there was not a coachman bringing a note from Count Vronsky there. Count Vronsky? Someone from there was here just now, to meet the Princess Sorokina and her daughter. What is the coachman like? While she was talking to the porter, Michael the coachman, rosy and cheerful, came up in his smart blue coat with a watch chain, evidently proud of having carried out his errand so well, and handed her a note. She opened it, and her heart sank even before she read it. Very sorry the note did not catch me. I shall be back at 10. Vronsky wrote in a careless hand. Yes, I expected it, she said to herself, with a malicious smile. All right, you may go home, she said softly to Michael. She spoke softly, because the rapid beating of her heart impeded her breathing. No, I will not let you torture me, she thought, addressing her threat not to him, nor to herself, but to that which forced her to suffer, and she walked along the platform, past the station buildings. Two maid-servants, strolling about on the platform, turned their heads to look at her, and made some audible remarks about her dress. It's real, they said of the lace she was wearing. The young men did not leave her in peace. Gazing into her face and laughing and shouting unnaturally, they again passed by. The station master asked her in passing whether she was going on. A boy selling kvass fixed his eyes on her. Oh God, where am I to go? She thought, walking further and further along the platform. She stopped at the end of it. Some ladies and children, who had come to meet a spectacled gentleman and were laughing and talking noisily, became silent and gazed at her as she passed them. She walked faster away from them to the very end of the platform. A goods train was approaching. The platform shook, and it seemed to her as if she were again in the train. Suddenly remembering the man who had been run over the day she first met Vronsky, she realized what she had to do. Quickly and lightly descending the steps that led from the water tank to the rails, she stopped close to the passing train. She looked at the bottom of the trucks, at the bolts and change and large iron wheels of the slowly moving front truck, and tried to estimate the middle point between the front and back wheels, and the moment when that point would be opposite her. There, she said to herself, looking at the shadow of the truck on the mingled sand and coal dust which covered the sleepers. There, into the very middle, and I shall punish him and escape from everybody and from myself. She wanted to fall halfway between the wheels of the front truck, which was drawing level with her, but the little red handbag which she began to take off her arm delayed her, and then it was too late. The middle had passed her. She was obliged to wait for the next truck. A feeling seized her like that she had experienced when preparing to enter the water in bathing, and she crossed herself. The familiar gesture of making the sign of the cross called up a whole series of girlish and childish memories, and suddenly the darkness that obscured everything for her broke, and life showed itself to her for an instant with all its bright past joys. But she did not take her eyes off the wheels of the approaching second truck, and at the very moment when the midway point between the wheels drew level, she threw away her red bag, and drawing her head down between her shoulders, threw herself forward on her hands under the truck, and with a light movement as if preparing to rise again, immediately dropped on her knees. And at the same moment she was horror-struck at what she was doing. Where am I? What am I doing? Why? She wished to rise, to throw herself back, but something huge and relentless struck her on the head and dragged her down. God forgive me everything, she said, feeling the impossibility of struggling. A little peasant, muttering something, was working at the rails. The candle, by the light of which she had been reading that book, filled with anxieties, deceptions, grief, and evil, flared up with a brighter light, lit up for her all that had before been dark, crackled, began to flicker, and went out forever.